This is part two on discovering my spiritual gifts. In part one, I talked a little bit about some of the earliest memories that I have of spirit, the divine, my connection to the other side. And now I'll get a little bit further into the forgetting, I'll call it. As I grew, I dove headfirst into being a human, and being earthbound and having all of those experiences with my friends, development, working on my goals toward, what career do I want to have, all that. So, getting to the point of saying, if you had asked me in my teens or my 20s if I was a psychic medium or had a link to receive messages or channel messages from the other side, I would have surely said no to that and been like really curious as to why I was being asked that question, of course, to begin with. So then where did it go from there? How did I get into awakening to remembering that connection with the divine and honing into that craft a little bit more? Um, and I think some of these experiences in my life I've touched on in other videos, but when I was in my college education, grad school, was definitely during the period of time I was like zoned in on the human accomplishments and definitely didn't have anything that I would say was a spiritual practice of any sorts. And then I got into my first career as a psychotherapist in community practice. And I did start very shortly after that noticing in sessions and after sessions, I'd have that feeling of awe of what just happened. How did what I said in that session come out of me? Like, um, yeah, just being in awe. And I say that not at all from a place of like, oh, I'm amazing, but more that I was like, ooh, something's happening here. Like that feels different. That feels like something, right? But I had no clue really what it was. I just was like, whoa, how did that just come from me? How did the exact words this person needed to hear that doesn't sound like language I would even come up with, just come forward in that session? And I would be in awe. And then I'd be like, on to the next session and keep going. So I wasn't lingering there and I didn't have the answer to it. It was just the early noticings of something's going on. And then about 8 years ago, probably a couple years before I got pregnant with my daughter, my first child, I started to see a lot of synchronicities, and it really began with number sequences. 111, 444 was the big one to start. 777, 333, 888, 555. But mostly the first sets of what I was mentioning there, the 111, 444, 333, a lot, 777, quite a bit. And I didn't know what angel numbers were at the time. I just knew something wild was happening. So I would be talking to my friends and family and say, something's happening. I pulled up to 5 cars at 5 different stop signs in a sequence of 3 minutes with no other cars in between. And those cars were 111, 222, 333, 444, 555, right? Like, you can't make it up. And I had some family that was already, pretty spiritual, just intuitively without having a defined practice or like a contextual language around it. And those people would be right there with me, matching that energy and like, oh my gosh, something is happening. What is it? We don't know, but let's find out. Like, this is exciting. Let's keep seeing how this unfolds, right? Start journaling things down. And then I had other people who would not at all be matching that energy and would say, once you notice something, then you look for it and it will appear from a very dense kind of like 3D I believe in nothing except for what's tangible and in front of me type of place, which was a little deflating to me because I just was like, this is not what's happening. If I intentionally tried to look for these number sequences, there's no way I could find it like that. Like that's beyond me to be able to manifest that in that kind of a way. So I knew something was happening. I could feel the awe and the magic of it. And I was like, this is lovely. I like it. And I had a burning curiosity to know, what does this mean? What does this mean? But I didn't know what it meant fully, right? I just was noticing. So that's really where that started, was the number sequences. And then in my intro video, I think it was one of the first videos, I shared a little story about my journey to motherhood and becoming pregnant with my first baby. And I shared in that the little story about having a scare where I thought, oh, I might not be able to have children. And then the doctor called me personally on a Friday afternoon at 4:44 to say, like, everything looks great, right? So big confirmation on that. Once I was pregnant with my daughter, I really describe it like this divine alchemy that unlocked, a portal where the synchronicities, the winks from the universe, my awareness of my connection to the divine just expanded infinitely. And during that time is when I picked up the book Signs by Lynne Jackson, which I highly recommend for anybody who's interested. And what happened is, like, each chapter had some beautiful stories about people receiving signs from spirit, and they were themed. So the first chapter would be all about cardinals, the second about dragonflies, the third about white feathers, you name it. And as I read chapter one about cardinals, the next 3 days, spirit was showing up to me going, yes, Miranda, we are talking to you. Cardinals everywhere, right? In the next 3 days. So my spirit team and the messages I was receiving at that time were like, that book was being used by spirit in a very intentional, lovely way to be able to help pull me further into an understanding and awareness of the channels really that were open to me, and recognizing that internal connection, if you will. So, around the same time, I began to meditate. And that really, I think a lot of people can get immediately turned off by that idea of somebody saying, like, meditate, because there's a lot of, what's the word? Like, some people feel pressure around it of, I can't meditate. And it's like, once you really have a better understanding from my explanation of what that is, like, yes, you absolutely can, right? You're just putting too much pressure on what you think meditation looks like. But anyhow, being pregnant and having an infant, all that journey of motherhood lended itself well to meditating, because when the physical and lifestyle changes happen like that, some of the other things that I did for myself and time I had to be able to take care of myself and what taking care of myself looked like really transformed. So to be able to sit in my walk-in closet, turn the lights off, sit down in the middle of the floor, and have 5 minutes to myself, to just close my eyes and be alone and be by myself in the darkness and turn the light off, right? Um, that began around that period of time. So I would just drop into that stillness during meditation and clear my mind and just have a moment of nothingness. And in that stillness is where I started to notice what I was receiving in a different kind of way. So I had already been clear on receiving the synchronicities that were showing up for me in the 3D world like that, but I had not had yet this deeper level. And what I mean by that is in that quietness, I began to hear this, how do I explain it? Within that stillness and clearness, where I created that space inside of myself, inside of my mind, when I would drop into that 5 minutes of meditation, I began to receive. And what that felt like was very similar to the way your own internal dialogue, internal voice, that mind chatter, it felt very similar. It sounded, I'll say not felt, it sounded very similar to the way I hear myself inside of my mind talking to myself quietly, right? Your own internal dialogue. It was very, very close to that. And what made it stand apart is a feeling, a resonance, and a randomness. So, for example, I would be in that stillness, that nothingness, and then I'd get something. It sounded like my own voice inside of my head, but it said, Marley. And it sounded like that, like, boom, oh, I got it, Uh, and I noticed some kind of energy about it that didn't feel completely like it was being generated by me. And I couldn't have placed it if I wanted to. I was like, Marley, what does that mean? I don't know. So the not knowing what it meant was connected to, this is not coming from me. But I, again, recognized enough to note it. So I would keep a little meditation journal at that time, and I would literally just open up to a page and write the word Marley. There was nothing else for me to write. And so it sounds a little bit silly of like, okay, you journaled one word and it was Marley. Yes, I did, because I knew something was happening. And I was just kind of like along for the journey. Let's see what happens. So that same day, I would take my daughter to a park, and there'd be 5 people there, like a slow day at this park. And 3 of those 5 people would come up and begin conversations with me and introduce themselves. And all 3 were named Marley. This is not a name I'm, like that I considered to be popular. And I had not at that point, I maybe met one Marley in my life up to that point in time, right? And then so to come to a park like that and have 3 people come up to me and start conversations and be friendly and say, oh, my name's Marley, right? Oh, my daughter's name's Marley. I was just like, okay. And of course, then still I am like, I hear you, universe. I hear you, God, spirit, whatever you want to call it. I didn't know what was happening. So I'd probably call it a more looser term at that time of like, I'm being spoken to by the universe. What is this? I hear you, Marley. Yes, confirmation of what I wrote down. I still don't know what this means and what you want me to do with it. And nothing at the time, right? I mean, you'll see, because obviously it unfolded the way it was meant to unfold. So then the next couple of days when I would meditate, I would get something else. Again, that kind of like, boom, really random, but I'm starting to notice how it feels. And I know like something real is happening here. And so a next one would be Elvis. And then the next day I'm driving to work, I'm listening to a podcast that I've listened to for over a year now that is telling these like, it's actually called Psychic Teachers. It's like a lot of spiritual type of topics. And they've never talked about musicians or artists or anything of the nature. And this one day, the morning after I get Elvis in my meditation, they're saying, did you know that Elvis was a twin? And I'm like, okay, interesting. And I was getting things about twin around the time. So again, I'm getting the message through my meditation. Internally, I'm receiving it. And then externally, I'm getting validation in the 3D world around me of like, yes, ma'am, you are getting this. We are talking to you. You're hearing correctly. But I'm still, talking to like my friends saying like, I'm getting this, and this. I have no idea what this means. Like something's happening, but it feels just so, I can't the pieces of this puzzle are like so far apart I can't put it together. Um, and I would just write down the word, and keep it moving. I just knew something was happening. I let it unfold a little bit and continued to stay along the path of living my life in the meantime, noticing, taking the noticings, meditating. And then another one was Tigger, like from Winnie the Pooh. And then the next day, something about three little birds. And then I'd be in the grocery store, and the next aisle around, and Starbucks, like three little birds and Starbucks. I'm like, these are random. And then the next day I'm in the grocery store, and I round the corner, I'm in the coffee aisle, and this lady is wearing a three little birds shirt, and reaching for Starbucks coffee off the shelf. I almost bumped into her. I'm like, okay, what is this? So still like all these things that felt they were very disconnected. Marley, Tigger from Winnie the Pooh, Elvis, and did you know Elvis was a twin? Um, Hold on, I lost my train of thought there for a minute. And then one day I got Bob, like all over the place, right? To me, it felt all over the place. So then finally, this is happening over a period of maybe 3 months, that I'm like, oh, okay, I'm starting to actually like receive something here in this space in between when I meditate. And I'm getting all these validations the next day without stringing things together to get the meaning. And then I was on the journey to my second child, and I had gotten pregnant with him. Excuse me. I had gotten pregnant for the second child around like December of a couple of years back at this point, several years back at this point, and and ended up having issues with that pregnancy that was drawn out, lengthy process. I'll spare you all the details around that, but it ended up being finally diagnosed as an ectopic pregnancy of unknown location. So that's the unknown location piece, is like where it was a drawn out kind of process to have to go through. So I'm going through like something pretty difficult around the same period of time as I'm meditating and like getting these signs that seem really disjointed. Not the entire time. That was like the toward the end of that 3 to 4 month period of time. So this one day they finally call it and say, okay, we've got enough evidence to make this conclusion. You need to drive in for an emergency appointment tomorrow to have the treatment to take care of this, right? So I'm driving into that appointment, listening to this podcast by myself in the car, and as I'm pulling into the parking lot, this 5 minute stretch, if that, maybe 3 minute stretch of this audio that I'm listening to as I pull in to park for this is talking about grief, spirituality, the afterlife. And it's this woman talking about everything she's done in the aftermath of her husband's passing. And she says all of these so seemingly separate things in one chunk that's connected to grief, spirituality, a higher understanding. She goes, my husband loved Elvis. And so he has a shirt. We have a shirt for his, the like nonprofit or fundraising kind of, I forgot the language of what that is, but they set something up afterward in his memory. And one of the shirts we have is three little birds, but like, don't worry about a thing because he loved Bob Marley. So that three little birds, but it's in the Elvis headlining print because he also loved Elvis. So we have like two versions of this shirt made with those kind of themes. And, my husband's personality was like Tigger from Winnie the Pooh. So everybody nicknamed him and called him Tigger. And it's like, boom, 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 boom. Oh my goodness, right? You can't make that up. Again, like these 7 different things that I had gotten and knew I'd gotten confirmation that I couldn't make any sense of, all just were strung together. in a way I wouldn't have been able to imagine in this 3 to 5 minute segment as I park to get out of the car to go get this methotrexate shot for this ectopic pregnancy, right? And as I'm going to have this, like very emotional, difficult thing done, I'm being hugged by a sea of angels at the same time, right? Of, even though this feels difficult, it is not a sign of tragedy in the way it might have felt if you didn't know how divinely supported, loved, and guided you are being in this moment, and how, from a larger perspective that you don't fully have right now, how there's beauty within the design of how everything is meant to unfold with this child, right? Amazing. Amazing. So you can see kind of this evolution of where clearly we're at a different spot from just getting the angel number synchronicities and going like, what's that about? To like, okay, I am hearing these messages internally. I'm getting the deliverance of it, if you will, and connecting these dots in a different kind of way at this point through this journey. And I'm going to leave it there for a minute and pick up as I've got to switch gears to my next client session. So that experience being in the parking lot and having Spirit deliver through this podcast of that 3 to 5 minute segment, this golden thread that just pulled together all of those pieces to make this pattern clear to me, and to reveal the meaning, which I had been questioning and going, what does this mean? This all seems so like disconnected. What does this mean for such a period of time? It was a monumental part of my journey, my spiritual awakening, the point where I got to revelation of I'm being communicated with in a way that feels so meaningful. I mean, it wasn't nearly as clear. I was going to say so clear, but now I get a level of communication with Spirit that is, I want to say the difference, like an analogy for you is comparing this moment in time that I'm talking to you about from years ago to now would be like the difference in those wartime movies when you're seeing this person on this old radio dial trying to tune into like a Morse code frequency that feels like it leaves a time delay of like the information that I'm getting is 2 years old from this frequency, this outdated frequency of Morse code that I'm trying to figure out, compared to what I receive now. That's how unclear it feels at this perspective. But at the time, gaining that clarity on this is real, this is happening, this is amazing, I've got this divine link. And as I started to recognize that and feel the resonance of it, what the receiving felt like, it began to contribute to my retroactive realization that, oh, wait a minute, I actually have been communicating with Spirit my whole life. There's just moments where I got disconnected with the frequency a little bit more and stopped or didn't know how to label what it was that I was experiencing, if that makes sense. And I'll get into that a little bit more in the next part 3 of this story unfolding. So as I was moving into the next chapter, including like recovery from that ectopic pregnancy, I ended up hearing about and getting this book, Spirit Babies, which says how to communicate with the child you're meant to have. So I read through that. It has beautiful stories. And there's a really sweet little meditation in one of the pages that's like a spirit baby meditation that I started using pretty regularly. So I had, when I dropped into my meditations for several months after, started to have intentionality with communication and calling in the spirit of this second child. And I'm just gonna like tell you a part of that little meditation. It goes, oh, ah, oh, ah, om. And you kind of repeat that. So, um, lights my heart space up just because I did that on repeat for so many different times and felt that connection with the spirit of this little guy. And I'll unveil more of that whole sequence and story, which part 3 will include, and will end up leading into even more of this evolution with how I fine tuned it, how I realized I was able to bring forward messages to other people from their loved ones, like serving very much more in a medium role, um, and all that. So, part 3 to come.